If you've been having issues with cutting and sewing a bustier with yoke, this tutorial is for you. I'm going to teach you how to cut and sew a bustier with yoke. So I'm starting with my lining on a fold, okay? And that is my chest line, my bust line, my nipple point, my under bust point, and the hem, which is like my blouse length. Okay, I work with length 22 from this first line. That's the starting line. So at my nipple point, I came down by ½ an inch, and also at my under bust point, because I'm cutting directly on the fabric. So my nipple point was 9.5 inches, but I marked 10 inches. My under bust point was 13.5 inches, but I marked 14 inches because we are cutting directly on the fabric. So the first thing I went ahead to do was to mark my shoulder point at 8.5 inches. Now, after marking my shoulder point at 8.5 inches, from the center, I marked 4 inches for my neck width, and I came down by 3 inches for my neck depth. If you notice that sometimes I shout, I just notice that sometimes I talk and I begin to grumble, like my voice gets very low. So please bear with me, okay? So I just connected everything together, and after connecting everything together, at my shoulder point, I came down by ½ an inch so that we'll get our shoulder slant. You guys know our shoulders aren't straight. They are actually slanted. So you need to slant your shoulders when you're cutting, okay? So after slanting my shoulder, I marked half the length of my shoulder point, which is 4 inches, and I came in by ½ an inch. And after doing this, the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark circumference of my bust divided by 4. Now you are going to mark your own, because some of you will mark my own. That's why I no longer put my own on the screen, because some of you will mark my own and tell me it's too big for you. So I marked circumference of my bust divided by 4. Then the next thing I went ahead to do now was to insert my armhole, okay, which is what I'm doing here. I went ahead to insert my armhole curve or armhole, anyone. Choose the one you want to call it. So after inserting my armhole, the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark my nipple to nipple measurement, which is my nipple to nipple measurement is 4 inches, but I marked 4.5 inches because I'm marking directly on the fabric, okay? So I marked this at my nipple point, my under bust point, and the hem. So after doing this, I connected my markings together. Now at my chest line, before I bite my tongue, at my chest line, I marked 5.5 inches, okay? At the chest line, 5.5 inches. At the nipple point, under bust point, and hem, I marked 4.5 inches, okay? So that's like 1 inch difference. Okay, so now at my under bust point and the hem, I took 1 inch on both sides. Okay, I took 1 inch on both sides. After taking 1 inch on both sides, I connected my hem to my under bust point. Okay, so after connecting my hem to my under bust point, I connected my under bust point to my nipple point. Okay, if you don't understand what I'm saying, just look at what I'm doing. Now at the chest line, I marked ½ an inch on both sides. Okay, I marked ½ an inch on both sides. Now after marking ½ an inch on both sides, the next thing I went ahead to do was to connect it back to my nipple point. You see why your nipple point measurement is very important. Okay, now the next thing I went ahead to do is, because we're going to cut this part out, this part that we use to create a bustier, we're going to cut it out. So you need to add the measurement back to your fabric, so which is what I'm doing here for the chest line and for my bust point. So at my under bust point, I marked circumference of my under bust divided by 4. That part we are going to cut out, I added it back. At the hem, I marked my hips divided by 4, and of course this part we are going to cut out, I added it back to my fabric. Okay, so after doing all this, the next thing I went ahead to do was to connect all my markings together. Okay, I connected all my markings together. Now you guys remember that we readjusted the chest line because of the yoke. Okay, so we are going to reconnect the armhole. Okay, so now the next thing I went ahead to do was to connect the armhole. I stopped at the chest line, but I advise that you further extend that connection to the shoulder point, okay? Because this is how I worked with mine, and after sewing my yoke, I just had to trim about ½ an inch away. But if I had connected it to my shoulder point, I wouldn't have had the need to do that. So you might want to do that, okay? So the next thing I went ahead to do was to add 2.5 inches sewing allowance. Okay, so I added 2.5 inches sewing allowance. Now at the middle, I went down from the chest line. I came down by 1.5 inch and I connected it, to my bust point. So after connecting it to my bust point, this is what we have here. At my neck width, at my neck width, I extended the line upwards and I inserted the sewing allowance, that's the joining allowance for my shoulder slant, because you don't want to mess with the dimension of the shoulder you've already cut. So this is what we have here for the front part. Now the next thing I went ahead to do was to cut it out. Very simple. I just went ahead to cut it out. Now when you are cutting, you have to be very careful, because one thing is to cut, another thing is to cut right. One thing is to mark, and another thing is to cut right. So I took my time and I wanted to show you guys so that you don't make mistakes when you are cutting yours. So after cutting, this is what we have here. I went ahead to tag it. I tagged it yoke. I went ahead to tag it center front. I also tagged it side front. So I'm going to use this lining to cut the main piece, for the front part. So after using the now it's time for the back part. Let me not bite my tongue. It's time for the back part. Now that's my starting line. This is my bust point, my under bust point, and the hem, which is like my blouse length. I work with length 22. Now from the top, I marked 1 inch for my zip allowance. Mark 1 inch for my zip allowance. Then I use my ruler to connect the markings together. Yes, that's my baby's leg, because he likes staying on my back and I have to work. So from the middle, the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark my shoulder point at 8.5 inches. So I marked my shoulder point at 8.5 inches. After marking my shoulder point at 8.5 inches, I drew a straight line. I drew a straight line, and you should draw a straight line too. Now at that point, I also went ahead to mark my circumference of my bust divided by 4. So after doing that, from that line, which is my zip allowance line, I took my neck width at 4 inches and my neck depth at 1 inch. You want to keep that same measurement and the allowance. So I also marked 1 inch on the allowance point, connected it together. After connecting it together, I just went ahead to connect my neck width and my neck depth together, and this is what we have here. So at my shoulder point, I came down by half an inch. To shape my shoulder line. So after coming down by half an inch, this is what we have here. Then just like we did for the front, I came down by 4 inches, which is half the length of the shoulder point, and I came in by half an inch. Let me clear my voice, forgive me guys. So I came in by half an inch. After coming in by half an inch, the next thing I went ahead to do was to draw my armhole. It's that simple, guys. I drew my armhole. This is why you need to get your rulers. It will help cutting easier. It's not that you can't cut without your ruler. You can, but it helps make it easier. So from my zip allowance point, I marked 4.5 inches for my dart line. So just work with whatever you work with for the front. I marked 4.5 inches for my dart line, and now at the top there, I took half a cm on both sides, which is 1 mm. I took half a cm on both sides. At my under bust point, I took half an inch. I took half an inch on both sides, and I just connected it to the hem with a tapered rule. You can see how I connected it. I didn't want plenty. When it comes to shaping the dart, at the back part of a bustier, there are different ways, and I decided to shape it like this today. So now after drawing my dart, I just went ahead to add that part back to my measurement, because you guys know we are going to cut it out. So at my under bust point, I marked my under bust measurement divided by 4. At the hem, I marked my hips measurement divided by 4. So after doing this, the next thing I went ahead to do was to connect all my markings together. I connected all my markings together. Then I also went ahead to add 2.5 inches. 2.5 inches sewing allowance. So after adding 2.5 inches sewing allowance, I just went ahead to connect everything together. See, the back part of a bustier with yoke is actually the easiest, in my own opinion, for me. So after marking, the next thing I went ahead to do was to cut. Now something I forgot to do in this blouse was to shape to shape the sides, but what is good is good. Okay, so now I forgot to add the joining allowance for the shoulder, so I went ahead to add it, then I continued cutting. Okay, so I just cut out that top part. That's going to be the yoke for the back part. You can as well skip having yoke for the back part. Okay, so I went ahead to tag to mark those points. Okay, center back, side back. You want to mark those top parts so that when you want to start sewing, you don't get confused. Okay, so that top part is the yoke, and we have the center back and the side back. Now this is the yoke for the front part, and the next thing I went ahead to do was to add sewing allowance to the yoke. Very important. So I use this chantilly lace because that's what I'm going to use as my yoke. I just went ahead to use the chantilly lace, and I added sewing allowance to the yoke. That's the down part. Then I went ahead to cut it out. Okay, I went ahead to cut it out. So you want to make sure it's well aligned. So after cutting it out, this is what we have here, both for the front and the back part. What I did for the front, I also did it for the back part. I added sewing allowance. So now I told you guys that I was going to use the lining to cut the main piece, and that is what I did here. I used the lining to cut the main piece. You guys don't know, I do freehand a lot too. Just I was pampering you guys with pattern drafting. So anyway, I'm back to my freehand. I'll do pattern drafting for you guys, but it is what it is. Okay, I'm having a lot of fun. Okay, I'm having a lot of fun with this voiceover. So this is the back part, and I did same thing that I did for the front part. For the back part, I used the lining to cut the main piece, and I cut exactly because I added sewing allowance. So these are the yoke for the front. You can see there's a sewing allowance there, and this is the yoke for the back. Now this is how you're going to join the yoke. You're going to grab whether the front piece or the back piece. You're going to place it on a triangular fabric. I know you're not seeing, but just stay with me, okay? Trust the process. And you're also going to do same for the back part. So I grabbed the front piece, and I'm just going to join it to the other fabric, which is like the lining piece. Okay, so after joining it, the next thing I went ahead to do was to cut out the outline of my neckline. So after cutting out the outline of my neckline, I went ahead to flip it over and top stitch. Now after flipping it over and top stitching and giving a good press, I went ahead to cut out the original shape of my yoke. Okay, now this was white, so you're not seeing a lot of things, but just imagine what I said you should do. Yeah, tailor now, you know that's how we do it. Okay, so I did same thing for the back part, and this is what we have here. If you don't want to go through the hassle of what I just went through now, you can just cut it exactly. Okay, but I was working with chantilly lace, and it was annoying to do that, so I just worked with a straight fabric. Okay, so now this is the back part, and the first thing I went ahead to do for the back part was to align the pieces of the back part together. So after aligning the pieces of the back part together, I went ahead to join on those points I showed you. So after joining on those points I showed you, I did for the first piece of the back part. I also did for the second piece of the back part. Now after doing this for both pieces, I also went ahead to do same thing for the lining. Don't forget, always do whatever I do to the main piece to the lining. Okay, so I did same thing to the lining. Yeah, I forgot to tell you guys that I put forcible interface and I padded this outfit. Okay, anyway you guys saw it. Okay, so now this is the yoke that we've already turned over, and how to attach it is you're just going to grab the yoke. You're going to place it right side of the yoke facing the right side of the fabric. You're going to align it properly. Okay, so after doing this, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to grab your lining piece. I'm going to align it properly as well, secure with your office paint, and you're going to join. Okay, so I just showed you the demo for the first one. Let me show you the demo for the demo for the second one. My able tongue is coming out, so just like we did for the other part, we're going to do it for this part. So I took it back to my sewing machine and I just joined it. Now after joining, I joined both for the front side, for the left hand side, and for the right hand side. Then the next thing I went ahead to do was to flip over the lining. So after flipping over the lining, I am going to top stitch. I know a lot of you will be like, Ada Oju, it's not top stitching. I've told you people that I'm too old to start calling it under stitching. I've told you people. You that know is under stitching, no problem, is under stitching. Me, I'm calling it top stitching. Thank you very much. So I went ahead to top stitch the lining, and after top stitching the lining, this is what we have here. I used my hemming gum to hold down the zip allowance, the sides, and the hem. So after doing this, the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark out my zip allowance. You know that zip allowance we marked out before. So I went ahead to mark it out so that we start the whole sewing process, both for the front and for the back. It's not like we've not started before, but you guys know that the zip allowance is very important. So after joining the zip allowance, this is what we have here for the back part after I gave it a good press. You can see it is looking beautiful already. Now it's time for the front part. Okay, so for the front part, I just grabbed my side front and placed it on the center front, and I did same thing for the other piece of the side front. I placed them on the center front and I took them over to my sewing machine. You want to make sure you secure it with a pin. Don't allow your village people whisper to you. Secure it with a pin. Don't do, I've been sewing for 10 years plus. Secure it with a pin. Don't give the devil a chance. Okay? So after securing with a pin, after securing with pin, I just went ahead to cut the bustier with little cuts so that it will be well relaxed when I give it a good press. And after giving it a good press, this is what it looked like. Okay, so after giving, I did same thing for the lining piece. This is what we have here for the lining piece. See, when you prep your fabric, sewing is easier. Okay, so now to join the yoke for the front part, it's a little bit tricky. You want to make sure you mark the middle. Now after marking the middle, you want to make sure you align it properly to the middle point of the front part. Okay, so you align to the middle point and you pin only one side. After pinning one side, before you now stretch and sew the other side. Okay, so this is what I'm doing here. I used my pin to hold it down to the bustier. Then I'm just going to join one side, which is the side that I pinned. After pinning, I took away the pins and I joined the other side, and this is what we have here for the yoke. So after joining the yoke, the next thing I went ahead to do was to grab my lining. I aligned the middle of the lining to the middle of the bustier and the yoke, and I just went ahead to use same line that I used to join the yoke and the main bodies. I used it to join the lining. And after joining the lining, the next thing I went ahead to do was to top stitch. My voice is going down again. You guys, I don't know. Okay, so after joining the yoke to the front part, this is what we have here, guys. Very simple, very straightforward. Now the next thing I went ahead to do was to grab my back part, because you guys know that we already prepped the back part. So after securing with my office pin and marking out my measurement, I'm going to go ahead to join my shoulder slant first. So I took it over to my sewing machine. I joined my shoulder slant. You guys, I was not in the mood to be changing thread, so I was working with both my domestic machine and my industrial machine. Okay, so after joining the shoulders, the next thing I went ahead to do was to join the side. Okay, I joined the left hand side and I joined the right hand side. Okay, so after joining it, to turn over the hem, I just grabbed this fabric strip, and the width of this fabric is 1.5 inch. You can work with 2 inch because 1.5 inch is stressful. So I just used the fabric strip to turn over the hem. Okay, so after turning over the hem, I went ahead to fold and top stitch. Okay, so after turning over the hem, folding and top stitching, this is what it looks like. Very simple, very straightforward, very neat. It's giving mwah, mwah, mwah. Okay, so this is what we have here, guys. Now I was a little bit conflicted, if that's the right word, whether I should use a black zip or a white zip, but I ended up using a white zip because of the yoke. So when you're working with yours, you might want to work with a zip that is the color of the yoke. Okay, so I went ahead to attach the zip to the blouse. Okay, this didn't take me time. You guys, I'm not a pro when it comes to attaching zip, and this is my zip. You want to make sure you give it a very good press. You iron as you sew. Don't go and be sewing with that iron, you know. Don't let me flog you with cane. Okay, so this is what it looks like after I attach the zip. Now it is time to attach the sleeve, and I went ahead to cut out a basic sleeve. If you don't know how to cut a basic sleeve right now on this channel, you need cane, because I have 3 tutorials on how to cut a basic sleeve. I'm going to leave the link of those tutorials in the comment section or in the description box. You want to check it out. So the first thing I went ahead to do was to fix the sleeve into the armhole, secure with my office pins like I'm showing you right now. Okay, I did this for the first sleeve and for the second sleeve, and then I took it over to my sewing machine and I just joined it. Okay, now joining sleeve with chantilly lace is very easy. It doesn't stress you as much as cotton fabric or other fabric. Okay, so you guys, I just took my time to join the sleeve, and after joining the sleeve, this is the beauty I came up with. Yes, I went ahead to put some crystal beads because I didn't just want it to be basic. So this is how to cut and sew your bustier with yoke. You can see it is yoking, it is bustiering, it is giving everything it's supposed to give. 10/10, nothing left. It is giving everything it's supposed to give. So you guys, if you enjoyed this video, if you watched up to this point, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. If you're watching from Facebook, make sure you share, make sure you like, make sure you follow my page. If you're watching from YouTube, make sure you like, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in